Good morning and welcome to Institut de Quebec's weekly webinar. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming 4 women from the First People Storytelling Exchange. The First People Storytelling Exchange is led by Montreal's Dawson College in partnership with McGill University, First Nations Regional Adult Education Center, Kanawaki Survival School, Concordia University, and others. Stories are collective accounts shared in talking circles, individual and family testimonials, and narrative films created in collaboration with project filmmaker Our World. Today we have with us storytellers Pasha Partridge and Sophie Tukalak, and facilitators Michelle Smith and Nicole, Yves. Pasha is an Inuit and Mohawk artist and filmmaker. She completed her DEC at John Abbott College and started her studies in education at McGill. Pasha was a storyteller and research assistant for the project and made the film The Story of Pasha. Sophie was born in Purunatuk and grew up in Kuujjuaq, Nunavik. She is doing a double major in First People Studies and Applied Human Sciences at Concordia. She is driven, passionate, very social, and enjoys getting the chance to speak to others. Sophie was a storyteller and translator for the First People's Storytelling Exchange. Michelle Smith is an award-winning Métis filmmaker, media artist, and educator. She was born and raised in St. James, Manitoba. She uses diverse media and participatory strategies to explore issues around Indigenous identity and resurgence, education, and intercultural experiences. She has directed and produced numerous documentary films and interactive media. She led and taught in the Journey's First People's transition program at Dawson for 4 years. She is a founding member of the Dawson's First People's Initiative, Indigenous Education Council, and Intercollegiate Decolonizing Network, and teaches cinema communications at Dawson College. She is currently pursuing a PhD in education at McGill with a focus on Indigenous educational sovereignty. And Nicole Yves is an associate professor and director of the Bachelor of Social Work program at McGill University School of Social Work. Dr. Yves teaches Indigenous field studies, history and philosophy of social work, policy and practice with refugees, and anti-oppressive social work practice. She is a founding member of Indigenous Access McGill, a program that supports Indigenous students in the School of Social Work and in the broader university. Sans plus tarder, je cède le micro à Pasha, Sophie, Michelle et Nicole. Bonne webinar.
Bonjour, Miunash Katuk, Tanshi Kiawau, Michelle Smith Dishnakashan, Winnipeg Duchin, Jojage Newikin. Merci beaucoup, Deborah, pour l'introduction. And welcome everybody, bienvenue. Je m'appelle Michelle Smith, je viens de Winnipeg, je suis métisse de la nation métisse de la Rivière-Rouge en Manitoba. Et c'est vraiment un grand plaisir de partager nos expériences. C'est un projet assez costaud, je dirais, qui dure 5 ans. Et on vient de présenter notre site web qui contient une bonne partie de nos recherches, nos films, nos histoires qu'on a collectées à travers ce projet. Alors, je vous invite à regarder notre site web. Je vais vous présenter un peu de matériel là-dessus, avec évidemment les partages de mes chers collègues. Just before I get into my presentation, I just want to acknowledge the territory where I am. It's interesting in these days doing Zoom meetings and get-togethers when we gather together in a location. It's an important protocol for us to acknowledge where we're gathering. So I would recognize the territory where Dawson College, the lead institution on this project, is situated, and that's Ganindehaga territory, unceded territory. And I pay my respects to this beautiful territory and the keepers of this land, part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. It's also a gathering place and has been historically and continues to be a gathering place for many nations. And our project, I think, reflected that. during the course of this project. Our aim really was to center and provide space for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students, former students, family members to share experiences. The project began in 2016, and it was at that time that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report had just come out. So, there seemed to be a swell of, movement and, okay, this is the time finally to acknowledge historical injustices and ongoing injustices that come from colonialism. I myself had started teaching at Dawson College. I'm a filmmaker, and was fairly new to that institution, and was really struck by the lack of Indigenous presence at Dawson, the largest college in Quebec. And I was really struck by that. In addition, as a teacher, I was hearing more and more stories about the challenges that students were facing at CEGEP, particularly students from the north, having to leave community and come down south to pursue their education, isolation and loneliness and complete culture shock, and being incredibly unprepared for the academic demands at college. So I had a lot of discussions about this with my colleague, Susan Briscoe, who was English faculty at Dawson at the time. And she's really the one who initiated this project, the late Susan Briscoe, in fact, who passed away over the course of this project. It was really this sense of urgency that, okay, we need to hear what students are saying, what they're experiencing, and ultimately what they want to see happen in post-secondary. What I think was also very important in this project, and it became even more important and evident over the course of gathering stories, was the importance of valuing Indigenous approaches to teaching and learning, and knowing that education isn't something that just happens in an institution. We've survived for generations because of education, because of teaching and learning and what's been passed on to us from our ancestors and our elders. And without that education and learning, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have survived. So it's incredibly important to honor that. And I think to recognize that these knowledges have a place in post-secondary institutions, but also what's happening outside of institutions, in community, on the land, is also incredibly valuable, and to be honored and celebrated and supported that transition of knowledge. So these are some of the things that were both impetus for the project, but also that were reinforced over the course of the project. So I thank Deborah for the invitation and the option to share today, because it's been a profound learning experience. I know for me as project lead, as principal investigator, we built a beautiful community out of this project, and I think not only do we have very tangible outputs in terms of over 100 stories shared, stories gathered in talking circles, in individual exchanges, in films, both individual testimonies of experience in post-secondary, but also narrative films. And in addition to that, really the process and the way that the project unfolded and how things were done have been very, very important to us, really centering decolonizing methodologies, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. So I think I will stop talking for the moment, and I'm going to show you a 4-minute film that really gives a sense of the project and some of the voices involved, and then I will pass it to my colleagues. So I'm going to share my screen and I'll show the short video, and hopefully this will work for you all. Right, I'm going to start again because I want to click on the audio optimize. There we go. That's better.
The more there is of Inuit and all Indigenous people in post-secondary education, it's gonna motivate a lot of younger people to go in that route too, and to eventually be self-determined people.
Success is taking the best formal education you're receiving and merging it with the wisdom of your ancestors.
I'm doing this because I'm thinking about everything that I've been through. And when I heard about it, I said, I want to be a part of that because I don't want anyone to give up.
I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. I don't think I would be able to get as far as I have without all the support that I had from my parents, my family, to get this far.
I really think it's the people around us who help us get through these barriers or make us strong enough to do the work we need to do.
Indigenous education is like that. Everybody has their own part. And so everybody learns as one.
Sunaliman avongalo onna pistillagalo tutintuinausta pistillagalo angayokto mipigusuutsaaqqugu.
There's a lot of good things that come with college, as well as a lot of hardships, but they're worth it because you're not going to be in school forever. You're just there to get better educated and better yourself and take those tools and bring it to wherever you want to apply it to.
As a people, we all have our dreams and our hopes and aspirations, and we have different things that we want to do. My sister did art, and I know there's students who are like going into education, and others another one who wants to become a pharmacist.
We are capable. We have gone through a lot in history, and we are still here today. It's not going to be easy in the education system because a lot of it is bureaucracy, and it's not our way of doing, but we're, I guess, slowly trying to find a way that fits us and trying to make changes in the system so that our voices are heard too.
I'm hoping that someday there's going to be stageships and universities up in Nunavik could be more oriented, and I think that's very important, and it would help with our self-determination.
Change is going to happen.
Perhaps just before I pass things on to Pasha, you can see the many partners that have been involved. Many became involved along the way. And I also wanted to underline that of the 100+ stories that have been shared, a good majority were shared by Inuit storytellers. We held talking circles and storytelling exchanges both in Jojage, or otherwise known as Montreal, at Concordia, Dawson, also in Ganawagi and Ganastage. And we traveled to Nunavut, the great privilege to spend time there with community members in Kuujjuaq and Kangasoochuaq. So now I will pass it to Pasha Partridge.
Hi everyone. Basa Vonga, Gudra Miangutsanga Inutsanga, Ganyanki Hako Tsunga Ganawagi Miangutsangalo. Hi, my name is Pasha. I'm an Inuk from Kuujjuaq and Ganyanki Haka from Ganawagi. I attended post-secondary education from 2014 to 2018. From 2014 to 2017, I was at John Abbott College in the social science program, and I graduated in 2017, continuing on to McGill University. I only did 1 year at McGill University because I ended up leaving for a year due to depression. But I'm hoping that when I return back to school, what this project has done will create changes. So I'm excited to return back and see the things that have changed since the last time I left. I've been part of the project since the beginning, since 2016. And I first started as a participant and ended up as a research assistant later on. My main role in the project was to attend conferences to share my educational journey and also to transcribe and categorize the content of the stories that we heard. Sorry, I'm blanking. I got to make a film with the project, The Story of Pasha. It was a 2-week project where we got to make our film with amazing mentors. I got to network with really amazing, well-known people like Glenn Gear and Courtney Montour. And it was really great having another Inuk there with me as I was making my film. It felt very welcoming, and I was able to share my stories with someone who understood me. So my film is something I take great pride in. The film has actually gone to many film festivals, including Imaginative and Maoriland in Australia. So throughout the project, I got to attend conferences. Like I went to Illinois at one point with the team, and we got to share our educational journey with a bunch of academics. And it was a really mind-opening experience because I got to learn so much about education. And it was people from all over the world. So there were people talking about like decolonizing education in like Africa. And I thought that was really interesting because I'd never thought about that. This project has helped me grow a lot in a sense. I was really shy at the beginning, but now I'm a little bit more confident to share my journey and my story. And so when I went to John Abbott College, the reason why I chose it is because there were Inuit there, and I actually moved to Montreal when I was 14, so I didn't have to leave my hometown to pursue post-secondary education like most Inuit. So I didn't experience the sudden homesickness like a lot of people do. I had already been homesick for many, many years when I attended post-secondary education. So I had been used to it. It didn't affect me the same way. So I was able to focus on my education. And because I graduated in the South, it was a little easier for me to apply for CJEPs and to learn about these resources because I had amazing counselors that taught me how to apply for CJEP. So it wasn't too big of a transition. The only thing that I noticed was that when I was applying for colleges, I didn't really know that much about other programs. I didn't know how to drop courses. So I felt really unprepared. I felt really lonely. So it really helped that I chose a CEGEP that was close to the Student Resource Center for Inuit. We had counselors pretty much right next door that I was able to go ask questions to, and I felt like that was one of the most beneficial things that kept me going in school. There were times I felt like giving up, so I'd go see my counselor and they would help me push past my emotions and encourage me to continue going to school. So I feel like it was really nice to have other Inuit there with me, because I felt really lonely, like no one knew about my culture, no one understood where I was coming from. So having other Inuit, I felt understood. So when I left John Abbott College and went to McGill, I was like almost 2 hours away from that resource center. So it made it difficult for me to contact my counselors. We had to do it online, and it was not the same experience. So that was one of the hurdles that I experienced when I went to McGill. I didn't have the same resources as I had before. So I feel like for education to be effective, especially for Inuit youth, having a close connection to the counselors of Gativik Ilisatnirin, I can't say the school board name, it's really long. Yeah. I feel like having a student resource center also for university students would be really beneficial. But if I feel like the ultimate amazing thing that would happen for the North is having post-secondary education in the North, so that I wouldn't have to leave my community to pursue post-secondary education. One of the reasons why I left Kuujjuaq was to pursue better education, because the primary education there isn't all that great either. I kept having classes that were just canceled outright for the whole year because there was no teacher. So I was noticing that my education was starting to get affected. So that was one of the reasons why I decided to move to the South. If that wasn't the case, I probably would have kept connection to my culture. I probably would have, I don't know, maintained my friends. I'd feel more welcome going back to the community. I haven't been there for a couple of years now because the housing crises is such an issue that I can't, I don't have a place to stay for me to return back. So it's hard for me, being someone who moved away when I was 14. There's a lot of complications in me returning back. Like, I don't remember a lot of people, so there's that awkwardness of like, oh, you know me, but I don't remember you. I have a lot of those situations because I moved away when I was so young. So little things like that prevent me from returning back. But one of my main goals when I moved here was to bring my education back to the North. And I would still like to do that. I just need to figure out the little extra hurdles that I have to go through to get there. Because I ended up leaving education, the kindergarten and elementary program at McGill. I've been thinking about what direction of education I'd like to go. I want it to be beneficial to Inuit. So, and I also want it to be passionate for myself. So I've been thinking long and hard about what I want to do, and I'm still in the process of thinking. So I'm hoping one day when I return back, this project will have made a big difference, and I'll have other Inuit in the classroom with me who are confident in themselves and confident in the educational institution, and I have high hopes. Yeah, I'm gonna pass it to Sophie now.
Sophie, before you start, I just want to mention that Pasha is such a talented creative filmmaker, and I'd really love to share her film with you. So perhaps after everybody speaks, then we can show Pasha's film and talk about our collaboration with filmmaker group Our World. And Pasha has been involved from the beginning, and we've so appreciated your insights and your passion and your courage and your important contribution to the project. Sophie, take it away.
Sophie bunga pon timitter tsunga ko ami pero ni hunga man naman tra me rolik hunga ako ni kalawlak miyo pasa nak miyo nakakataka vi nalinak to sara me pero sa pare. Hi, my name is Sophie. I'm originally from Nituk and grew up in Gutrak. I'm currently in Montreal right now. So I graduated from the north. I attended Yanamarek High School in Gutrak and I graduated with a Governor General's Award. So I always did very well in school. So I decided to move down to pursue my education. I ended up being put into John Abbott College because that is where majority of Inuit are placed. Not only because there's the resource center as well that Pasha had mentioned, but there's also our Inuktalik residents that Kativik Ilisak Nilirinik provides. And so I ended up being at John Abbott from 2012 to 2015, and then decided to go into Concordia. That is where I chose to be because of how diverse the institute is, but also with the knowledge that there are more Indigenous students attending Concordia. So I've been there since 2015. I'm currently taking a semester off for mental health reasons. And so that's actually another aspect that I've noticed since moving down south to pursue my education is our mental health really does get affected. The impact of moving away has such a positive and negative impact on our mental health. Not only does it make us stronger, but it really does show us the small aspects in our lives that are very precious and valuable. And always keep in mind that taking care of yourself is a priority before being able to take care of others. So something I've been learning to do a lot is where rather than trying my best and hardest to keep my motivation and energy on one project, try to take care of myself so that I can take care of more projects. And so, yeah, so my educational journey has been a huge roller coaster. As much as I really enjoy living in the South, I really do miss being home. Something Pasha had mentioned, and a few other students in the video as well, or one other student in the video mentioned, was that if we could get post-secondary in our hometown, that would be a huge benefit, not only to our communities, but to our people as well, because that would bring out our self-determination and to keep our people in our communities, because a lot of our young people are coming down south to pursue post-secondary, and we go back up north and there's no housing for us to return to, because in order to apply for housing, you need to be in the community for a certain period. So as a student, when you fly away for extended periods, you're not eligible to apply for housing. So that's another aspect that I wish could be more accommodating to students who are pursuing post-secondary away from their communities, is that we still have that same the same opportunities to apply for housing. I know I had like this whole list in my head to speak. Now I'm just like, what else should I say? I'm sorry.
We can come back to Sophie. I think sometimes when each of us speaks, it brings up ideas. It's like, oh, I want to add this, I want to add that. So
yeah, I know that's my problem right now. It's just like, now where was my train of thought? Well, with myself, I was part of the storytelling. I was just a storyteller, but also somewhat of a translator as well, because I was helping my mother translate. So I take a lot of pride in my language and my culture. And that's something I've tried to keep in contact with ever since I moved down. I do wish that we had a bit more resources in terms of off-campus resources. because there are a lot of amazing centers on campus to help us students, but sometimes I wish that we did have other resources off campus. As another thing that I found really, really beneficial in both John Abbott and Concordia is the Aboriginal resource centers. Those centers extremely benefited me because I found a safe place to be at when I was not inside a classroom. And the friendships that I was able to build, not with just other Inuit, but also other Indigenous students that are also away from their own communities to pursue their education, having a bond and a community formed on campus, knowing that I was not alone, was really helpful, because it's really lonely when you move away from your community. It's not just that homesickness, it's something that makes us students have to grow and age quicker compared to other students that live down the street from their universities or cegeps. I remember I was only 19. I just turned 19 when I moved down, and I had to mature so quickly because I had to learn how to do a lot of like time managing or even traveling and little things that I never had to do before. I had to learn really quickly. And if I didn't, I was always late, which also had an impact on my meetings and whatnot. So I find that us Indigenous students who move away from our communities are not only forced to grow up quicker compared to our peers, but we're also forced to really see our culture and how valuable it is from being away from that environment. Because when you're living in the same environment for so long, you're just so used to it. It's a norm. But when you move away from it, you realize all the amazing aspects that you never noticed before. So I'm really proud to have been part of this storytelling exchange because it really showed me how far I've come from when I first moved down, but also how emotional this educational journey is for me. I didn't realize, it was the first time I ever spoke about it, just to someone else and how I feel. And the questions that were asked were extremely helpful. But the storytelling really showed me the impact education has had on me, but also how far I've come. So thank you so much for having created this amazing exchange, Michelle, and the entire, everyone that worked on it. I was gonna say the entire cast, which isn't right. But yeah, thank you so much. I don't know what else to add, so I'll pass on the floor.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Yeah, your story is very, very powerful. And the translation work that you've been involved in is so, so important. I invite people who are watching today to come and look at the videos. With Sophie's help, you can understand the story of two wonderful elders from Tukalak, one who we honored in the video who had passed away, Mary Katanak. And I thank you so much. So Nicole, would you like me to put up the graphic of the outcomes related to Inuit in addition? Yeah, okay. So you let me know when you want me to put that up.
Okay, great, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to Pasha and Sophie. Every time I see the film, and hear you speak, it's just a wonderful, I just am so thankful I've been part of this project, part of the cast. I like that. And I wanted to just share just a few of the points of the overview of one of the, some of the themes that we've seen that we found from the narratives. And certainly I think that they're evidenced in Pasha and Sophie's stories, the strong connections among Inuit identity. So this, endurance, as well as pride in culture, and how that connects to success down south. Another thing I wanted to point out was Nunavik si Nutsavik. That one-year college program, we heard from participants, one of the keys for the success of that program were students were all Inuit. And they weren't walking into a classroom where they were the only Inuk student. And I think that a lot of Southern students may take that for granted. Certainly speaking from my own experience, I think Black, Indigenous, and people of color students feel that often in contexts in the South and post-secondary. But that was also something that came out. Just to strengthen, to add on to what Pasha and Sophie doesn't need strengthening, just to add on to what they were saying, the importance of support was key. And I think that oftentimes support can be seen in the South, in these Western conceptualizations, as something that's negative, something where you kind of need help, and that is seen as problematic. But I think coming from, for people who come from communities where support is something that's integral to community, and for members of the community, in order to ensure that they are doing okay, that they are thriving and surviving, it's not something that's seen as a negative. And so the support that Inuit students had from John Abbott, you could see as being critical, because that was something that they relied on at home as well, and that we all rely on to a certain extent. And it just highlights the disconnection when Inuit students are forced to leave. But I think the strongest thread, and that's just what I wanted to talk about briefly, the strongest thread running through all the interviews was, as Pasha and Sophie said, the hope and dream of having access to post-secondary education in Nunavik. And I just briefly wanted to read a quote from the stories, and Sophie or Pasha, it might be you, I'm not sure. But I just, to highlight this, the quote from an Inuk participant who was speaking to us in Inuktitut, and then to emphasize this for Michelle and I, who were hearing the stories, switched to English because she wanted to emphasize it. She said, "I can say this in English. It's so unfair. It's so unfair to make our children go through this. This shouldn't be the way anymore, not for a long time now. Our children should not have to leave, but that is the way we must live. A long time ago, our people used to have to leave for long periods of time for medical reasons. Now we have to leave for long periods of time for education." And it just kind of underscores the historical, the continuation of colonization and what that means for Inuit youth. And I'm very happy to say that hopefully, I think we get our contract very soon, so I don't want to jinx anything. But McGill School of Social Work, in collaboration with Marie-Victorin Cégep, School of Social Work will be delivering a Bachelor of Social Work program entirely in the North, starting in September. And the push for that, the team, we had a small team working on that, me and Professor Wander Gabriel from Ganasatake, Professor Carmen Cecilia from the School of Continuing Studies, and Pam Waitman from Indigenous Access McGill. It just, hearing these stories just solidified our determination to do whatever we could do to make this happen. And so we dreamed big. I think the Nunavik Health Board appreciated that. And so it's a very exciting, and the program will be tailored to Inuit realities and contexts, and we'll be working with Inuit to develop these courses. So I don't want to take any more time, but I just want to say thank you again to Pasha and Sophie and Lucina Gordon, Anna Christensen, Ginny Calvin, so many Inuit students who shared their stories and their challenges and what they wanted to see. So when we hope and dream, let's continue to dream big and see what we can do. Nakwamik.
Thanks, Nicole. It's so exciting about that program. I just quickly want to put on the screen
the outcomes. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah,
in my excitement.
Yeah, I mean, we'll of course, we invite you all to come and visit our website and spend some time. But for each community, we compiled outcomes and common themes. So we have common themes for Inuit, for Cree and Ganingehaga, as well as Tiohtià:ke or urban Indigenous experiences. So some of what Nicole talked about there is there. Nicole, did you want to add anything in relation to this graphic?
I think that I would encourage everyone who's, as you said, to take a look, because there's so much. And once you start, going through and hearing the stories, it really gives you a comprehensive overview, as well as kind of a deep dive into what the educational journey has been like for Inuit. And I just hope we have time for Pasha's film. So that's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Great. Yeah, just in the outer ring, future visions or recommendations. There was also a strong call for STEM programs, training in science and math, because many students found that prerequisites for college programs, for instance, for a student to really pursue sciences or engineering, for instance, it's difficult to get the prerequisites in community. So looking at, say, transition programs. I know that many Inuit participants talked about the need for more Inuit in leadership and governance. Okay, so I will stop sharing that, but let's look at Pasha's film. Just gonna share it again. Okay, let's take 1 second.
I've always had a strong connection to my name. I was named after my grandma. When I was younger, I was always really curious about where my name came from. My mom told me that I was named after my grandmother, Pasha. So when I got older, I learned that my name is actually shared by many people. All of the oldest children in every branch of our family holds the name Pasha. So for every aunt and uncle I have, their oldest child is named Pasha. I also have a sister with the name Pasha, which I always found really interesting. I also share my name with my little brother. When my little brother was born, my mom decided to name him in accordance to my name. My name is Pasha April Lucina Namayu Christina
Partridge. My little brother's name, Lucasy, Susie, Charles, Ituk, Michelle, Partridge. All of his names go together with my name. So the name Pasha and Lucasy, they were our grandparents. The name is special and unique, and there's a strong story to it. Have you ever wondered where your name comes from?
Awesome.
It's always so nice to see my film. I feel like it's important to note that we were asked to make a film about our education, just in the theme of education. And every time I look at my film, I think of how it relates to education. It relates to education in the sense that I'm teaching instead of being taught for once. And also, we learn from our parents first. So the knowledge that I'm sharing in this story is something I learned from my mom. So I'm passing the story on.
Yeah, Pasha, I'm happy that you had that opportunity to make your film and express a little part of your journey in a really creative way. And we collaborated with Our World, which is an organization that does workshops in community. With this project, workshops were held at Dawson College, Ganawage at the Ganawage Library, and in the north in Kangasujwak. There were 2 series of workshops held there, 2 down south. So there are a number of creative films that came out of it. And Pasha, your film it's just dynamite. Beautiful film. And you had mentioned, and I just want to underline that it's gone around the world, and it's been in film festivals, both locally, inter-island, and internationally. So congratulations. You're a great storyteller. Perhaps just lastly, there may be questions. I don't see any so far, but just quickly, I'll just show you a couple of pages of the website just to pique your interest. And then if there are any questions, we can respond. I'm just going to make sure I'm in the right time. I have so many tabs and I'm going between 2 browsers, so.
Michelle, while you're doing that, I might just say a few words about our Connections grant.
Of course.
Just to say that our original grant for the First Peoples Post-Secondary Storytelling Exchange didn't include any dissemination. And one of the things that we wanted to do after so many people shared their stories was to be able to go back to community and create community-specific videos and community-specific booklets, or small texts around each community. And so we applied for a short Connections grant and received that. And of course, then the pandemic happened. So we haven't been able to go back to community as we planned, but we will, hopefully this fall or next winter, because that's a key piece, and bringing back the stories to the communities who opened up their hearts and shared. so deeply with us. So we look forward to returning to the communities to share.
Just looking in the chat, a couple of comments. Rebecca Henning says, "What's in a name? I love this. Different cultures have such different and meaningful ways of naming their children, whether it may be the name itself that has a special meaning or whoever it is associated with." And then a question, have you heard of the next National Building Reconciliation Forum? The theme is falling into step with First Peoples students. I will certainly share this webinar with the organizer. It's wonderful, thank you. Bridget also says, thanks for sharing your experiences. Very interesting films and project. Julia Page-Daniel, thank you so much for sharing all of your stories. That's great. Yeah, please post your questions in the chat. I have heard of the National Building Reconciliation Forum. I was just talking about it in the meeting recently, actually. So it's great. There are some really wonderful exchanges happening, and things are definitely moving. I think a lot more conversation about what needs to change. I think we just need to see that change. I think that one thing too that came out in some of the stories was really the importance of having Indigenous peoples at the table. And really being involved in meaningful partnerships in change and in programs. We use this expression, nothing about us without us. If there are Indigenous programs or curriculum change or policy, it's really important that Indigenous voices be present, not just in a tokenistic way, but in a really meaningful way where there's really shared and collaborative decision-making happening. Okay, I'll quickly look to, yeah, it's already 10:53, time is moving on, and I'm sure people have to move on to other things, but I'm quickly going to show you just a couple of pages of the site. So here's the site. I just want to show you our pages of wonderful films. So these are the two elders that I spoke about that Sophie helped us to understand their story. So there are thematic films. Some of you may be interested in this film, My Language, My Culture, which talks about a partnership with the Collège Saint-Félicien to do an Arctic guide program in community, really interesting community. And these are compilations of parts of stories, specifically speaking to students, to teachers, to families. So really rich content there. And then many individual education journeys from many nations. Here's Sophie. Okay, and then here we have our films, the films that are a result of collaborations with our world team. These are also great if there are instructors or professors present to share in the classroom, young people sharing their stories. And then lastly, I just want to show a little bit about how we learned. We have quite a bit of explanation of our approach and our ethical approach and our methodology, grounded in decolonizing methodologies. So we really worked in a non-hierarchical way. We had always had food. Any participants and collaborators received a fee. We had many workshops and trainings. Capacity building was a big part of this project so that collaborators could come out with tangible skills. So our team of research assistants, we had trainings in transcription, in data analysis, in talking circle facilitation, in conference presenting, in film and video production. So a number of things that was really important. Part of, I think, really key in decolonizing research or Indigenous research to that the work be relevant. Part of relevance is to actually provide tangible outputs, including building skills. So, and there's also, we have, you know, pretty substantial research manual that you can take a look at that's available for you to draw from. So that's all. I'm going to stop sharing. And any questions, any thoughts from Pasha, Sophie, Nicole? Or shall we, oh, hi Deborah, maybe it's time to wrap it up. Mhm.
No, I just wanted you, can you just expand a little bit on the importance of the oral traditions of Indigenous people and the true definition of a storyteller? Are storytellers special people in a community, or can anyone be a storyteller?
Who would like to respond?
I think anyone can be a storyteller, but I feel like we listen to voices like elders are usually have more experience in storytelling, so their stories way more than a youth. But then in certain contexts, a youth's story might be more relevant than an elder's story. So I feel like everyone can be a storyteller. And in terms of storytelling, the project did a really good job in ensuring that our stories were heard. We all got filmed and we had consent whether we wanted our film to be on the website or not. So our stories were in our control. So we were able to share our story however we wanted. And this project did a really good job in ensuring that the stories were sacred and held in a good light. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but the storytelling that we did, like this project, the storytelling that we did was really, it was heard. And the reason why it was heard was because we were actually filmed. So you can watch our films on the website. So you can see all the students' experiences. And so I feel like that was really important.
Thank you, Pasha.
I know from a Cree perspective, and I've learned this from Mary Shem in Iwichi, for instance, that there is a distinction between types of stories. There are traditional stories, myths, for instance, myths and legends that address that have been passed on through generations, and then there are life stories. In Michif or for Métis, there isn't that categorization, but I would call ours life stories. And I think the idea is that a story it has a spirit, and it's something that exchange is involved, and a relationship is involved between the storyteller and the receiver of that story. So for us to put these stories out in the world, we noted in the website and a few words, but it's we ask that people who are hearing these stories and who are going to visit this website and see the stories that they're engaging, they're entering into this relationship. So as a recipient of this story, there's responsibility attached to it. So we ask that as people are hearing these stories, then that this is also you're now part of the circle. And we also ask you to consider that responsibility of what will you do with this story? How will you bring this into your life? And how will you bring this into change that might need to happen in your institution? And then practically in terms of, we did have discussions around the table. I remember actually that photo that you saw, it was at that table when we were talking about, the importance of respecting the integrity of the story. So from a research perspective, often we'll look at stories and gather themes and commonalities, and it's almost like we're picking apart the story. So we recognize the importance of drawing themes across the different stories to be able to have sort of broad calls and recommendations and see that there are commonalities among the storytellers, but we also really wanted to maintain the integrity of the story. So for instance, on the website, we have some thematic videos where we pull from the different stories, but we also have a section where the individual storytellers and the story is more or less unedited. We take out a few ums and ahs, but it's really the entire story, because within that story too, there are relationships, and it needs to be whole.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any more questions for our panelists? Don't see any. So I want to thank you all for sharing your stories with us today. And I encourage everyone to look at your website because there's some fantastic information there. And also, I would like to remind all participants in today's webinar that to come back next week when Camille Frechette, who is the coordinator of the Nunavik Regional Research Authority, will give us the recent information about the new agreement, the new research agreement that has been formed. Donc, merci pour tout le monde qui a participé aujourd'hui, puis rendez-vous la semaine prochaine, mercredi 10h pour une présentation par Camille Frechette, la coordinatrice de Nunavik Regional Research Authority. Merci et bonne semaine.
Merci.
Merci.
Make.
Nakamick.